before cities, before gods, before words. There was only survival. The earth was not yet tamed, and humans were not yet dominant. The story of humanity begins in a world that was wild, violent, and constantly changing. Long before civilization, the earth was a dangerous place. There were no roads, no shelters, no agriculture. The sky brought unrelenting storms, the cold could kill in a single night, and predators ruled the land. For early humans, members of the genus Homo, life was not about comfort or growth, it was about not dying. Millions of years ago, during the Pleistocene epoch, the planet underwent extreme climatic fluctuations. Glaciers advanced and retreated, sea levels rose and fell, massive deserts turned into forests and then back into dust. Early humans were born into this chaos. They didn't have tools at first. They didn't have fire. They were upright apes with fragile bodies but a spark of something new, adaptability. When we speak of early humans, we mean Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and eventually Homo sapiens. These were not civilizations. These were small tribes of foragers and hunters, moving across harsh terrain in search of food and shelter. They were nomads, following herds, avoiding predators, and trying to survive the whims of a violent planet. The climate played a direct role in shaping human evolution. Changes in temperature and rainfall determined where humans could live, what they could eat, and how they would evolve. Every advancement, from walking upright to making tools to discovering fire, was in some way a response to the challenges nature threw at them. The Sahara, which we now think of as a vast desert, was once a green paradise, full of rivers and animals. Then the rains stopped. Grasslands turned into sand. Tribes were forced to move. Some went north, some went east. This migration under pressure was not a choice. It was survival. The first great human journeys were not inspired by curiosity, but by desperation. Imagine a world without stability, a place where each generation had to relearn how to survive because the land kept changing. Forests became tundras. Warm valleys turned into frozen wastelands. Rain disappeared for decades. Humans didn't just survive this, they adapted. Our brains got larger. We became social, cooperative, and clever. We learned to observe the skies, track animals, and find food in the most unlikely places. But nature wasn't just a threat. It was also a teacher. Early humans learned by watching. They learned that fire could come from lightning, that caves could offer protection, and that animals migrated with the seasons. Over thousands of years, the earth shaped human instincts, the fear of thunder, the comfort of fire, the reverence for the sun. These weren't superstitions. They were survival mechanisms born from a deep relationship with the natural world. This era before civilization was also before time as we know it. There were no calendars, no clocks, no written records. Time was marked by the stars, the rising and setting of the sun, the length of shadows, the migration of animals, and the cycles of the moon. The rhythm of life was dictated by the earth itself, and yet even in this raw state humans began to show signs of something more. They made marks on cave walls, they buried their dead, they may have sung. These acts, art, ritual, memory, were the beginnings of culture, and they all happened while humans were still fighting the weather, the cold, the hunger. There is something deeply humbling in the idea that the very concept of being human, our emotions, our thoughts, our need for connection, was forged not in comfort but in struggle. We became who we are because we had to endure. Before there were pyramids, there were storms. Before there were kings, there were fires in the night. Before there was language, there was silence, and the need to break it. The story of climate and humanity is not just a story of temperature and weather. It is the story of our origin. It is the reason we walk on two legs, the reason we think, the reason we fear, and the reason we hope. As we explore how the first humans endured and adapted to climate, we are not just studying the past. We are studying the root of what it means to be human. This is not a story of ancient weather. This is the story of you. It was not fire that made us human. It was ice. Cold shaped us, tested us, and forced us to evolve or die. The ice ages were not a single event. They were long, repeating cycles of glacial advance and retreat that defined the entire Pleistocene epoch. Massive glaciers descended from the poles, covering vast portions of Europe, Asia, and North America. Temperatures dropped, ecosystems shifted, and life was forced into migration or extinction. For early humans, these frozen ages were an existential threat and an opportunity. Imagine the world 200,000 years ago. A biting wind howls across frozen plains. Forests are sparse, food is scarce, and predators are everywhere. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and woolly rhinoceroses roam the tundra. There are no crops, no firewood, no safety. And yet, humans survived here. It began with Homo erectus, and continued with Homo heidelbergensis and the Neanderthals. These were the cold-weather pioneers. They learned to use caves, hunt in groups, and create tools suited for survival in ice-covered lands. But it was not easy. Many perished. Entire clans disappeared. Only the most adaptable endured. One of the greatest adaptations was the use of fire, not just for warmth, but for cooking, light, and protection. Fire turned caves into homes. It extended the day beyond sunset. It kept predators at bay and allowed humans to settle in colder regions. For the first time, people could sleep through a freezing night and wake up alive. Another survival tool was clothing. Though the earliest humans were likely naked in warmer climates, cold forced innovation. Skins of animals became garments, bones became needles, fat became fuel. Layer by layer, humans wrapped themselves in the world they hunted. The brain was another weapon. Ice didn't just harden the body, it sharpened the mind. Planning became essential. Hunting large game in cold required strategy, communication, and cooperation. Humans began to think ahead, about seasons, about shelter, about migration paths. The cold demanded intelligence, and we responded. Neanderthals were especially skilled in cold adaptation. Stocky and muscular, with wide noses to warm the air they breathed, they thrived in Ice Age Europe for over 300,000 years. They built hearths, made tools from stone and bone, and even buried their dead. For a long time they were the masters of the cold world. But the ice was not stable. Climate oscillated. Periods of warming would melt glaciers, flood valleys, and change entire landscapes. Then the cold would return with vengeance. These shifts forced humans to move constantly. Migration was not a journey. It was a way of life. As Homo sapiens emerged and spread, they too faced the frozen world. The last major glacial period, known as the last glacial maximum, occurred about 20,000 years ago. Sheets of ice covered northern Europe and Asia. In response, humans developed new techniques, improved shelters made from bones and hides, more advanced clothing, and perhaps even early forms of social organization. The caves of France and Spain, where Ice Age humans left behind stunning cave art, show more than creativity. They show refuge. Deep inside the earth, humans sought warmth and safety. There, they painted mammoths, deer, and mysterious symbols, perhaps to understand, perhaps to control, perhaps to remember. But the Ice Age also killed. Harsh winters wiped out entire regions. Hunger was a constant shadow. If a hunt failed, people starved. Children froze. Elders died quietly in corners. The earth was not merciful. And yet, those who endured became stronger. The crucible of ice forged the spirit of resilience. The challenge of cold created bonds between individuals. To survive, humans had to share, to care, to cooperate. The cold built community. Many scientists believe that the Ice Ages are what made Homo sapiens superior to other hominins. Unlike Neanderthals, who remained in smaller groups and adapted physically, sapiens adapted culturally. They invented faster, they built better, they learned to trade, to tell stories, to form complex relationships. These social innovations gave them an edge in a world where nature had no mercy. And when the ice began to retreat, humans followed the melt. Rivers reappeared, forests regrew, the climate softened, and with it came agriculture, villages, and civilization. But none of that would have been possible without first surviving the cold. The memory of the Ice Ages lives on in our myths. Tales of great floods, of dark winters, of fire stolen from the gods. These are echoes of real events. The fear of cold, the love of warmth, the gathering around fire, all of it comes from a time when the ice ruled the world. Even today, traces of the Ice Age are found in our bones. Our bodies still react to cold with goosebumps, a useless attempt to raise fur that is long gone. Our fat stores cling to the hips and abdomen, the last vestiges of survival strategies. Our culture still honours winter with festivals, fires and rituals. We remember, even if we no longer know why. The Ice Ages were more than just cold periods. They were crucibles. They tested the limits of humanity and forged what would become the modern mind. Without ice, there would be no us. Cold sculpted our ancestors into thinkers, builders, survivors. And perhaps, somewhere deep in our DNA, we still carry that ancient instinct to look to the sky, to fear the coming storm and to gather close as the night grows colder. If ice forged our endurance, then heat tested our limits. Under the blazing sun, humanity learned resilience, movement and survival without shelter. While much of human evolution was shaped by glacial cold, another deadly force sculpted the human experience just as profoundly. Heat, scorching temperatures, endless droughts, and brutal sun exposure created some of the most hostile environments early humans ever faced. And unlike the cold, which one could escape with fire and fur, the heat demanded different adaptations: flexibility, hydration, mobility, and intelligence. Most scientists agree that the birthplace of humanity was in Africa, a continent where heat was constant, water was unpredictable, and survival required a delicate balance between exposure and shelter. The African savanna was not a paradise. It was a battlefield where shade was rare, predators were numerous, and the sun itself could kill. The first humans, such as Homo habilis and Homo erectus, emerged in this environment. Their bodies tell the story: long limbs for heat dissipation, dark skin for UV protection, and sweat glands capable of regulating internal temperature through evaporation. Unlike most animals, humans can run long distances under the sun without overheating, an ability known as persistence hunting. We could chase animals not with speed, but with endurance, running them down across miles of hot, open terrain until they collapsed. But heat brought more than physical stress. It brought unpredictability. Droughts would kill vegetation, drive away prey, and dry up rivers. In a matter of weeks, an entire region could become uninhabitable. And so early humans had to become nomads, not by choice but by necessity. They moved to survive. They followed the rains, the migrating herds, and the whispers of water. This forced mobility became a critical part of human evolution. Our ancestors developed mental maps, a memory of landscapes, watering holes, and seasonal patterns. They began to track the sky, notice patterns in animal movement, and develop a kind of early forecasting based on observation. In this way, the heat sharpened not only the body but the mind. Tools also evolved. In hot, dry environments, food sources were more scattered and dangerous. Sharp stones became essential for cutting meat and skinning animals quickly under the burning sun. Digging sticks helped access underground tubers or water-hidden roots. Shells or carved wood might have carried water for short distances. Early humans didn't just endure the sun, they adapted their behaviours, technologies and communities around it. Shade became sacred. Trees, caves, overhangs, any place that offered shelter from the sun was valuable. Groups likely moved from shadow to shadow, building temporary camps and resting during the hottest parts of the day. This rhythm, rising with the sun, hiding at noon, hunting in the early evening, was dictated by heat. The sun shaped our schedules long before clocks did, but heat also left its mark in myth. In oral traditions that survive today from desert and equatorial peoples, the sun is often a god, feared, respected, and sometimes punished. It is both the bringer of life and the harbinger of death. These stories reflect a memory stretching deep into the past, to times when the sun could mean survival or destruction. One of the most dramatic climate events affecting early humans was the desertification of the Sahara. Thousands of years ago, what is now the world's largest desert was once a green, fertile land filled with lakes, grasslands, and animals. As the climate changed and monsoon rains shifted, the greenery disappeared. What remained was sand and silence. This slow environmental collapse pushed human populations to move, north into Europe, south deeper into Central Africa, or east into the Arabian Peninsula. Migration was not a single journey, but an ongoing response to climate chaos. These movements seeded new adaptations, new encounters, and perhaps even new languages and cultures. It's likely that some of the earliest innovations in symbolic thinking and spirituality were born under the stress of drought. When crops failed, when water dried up, When animals vanished, humans sought meaning. Why had the rain stopped? Why was the sun angry? In these questions, religion was born, not as a luxury of thought, but as a response to environmental trauma. The harsh sun also made skin a battleground of evolution. The development of melanin, a pigment that protects against UV damage, was essential. Dark skin became a shield, a genetic memory of generations spent under brutal rays. Even today, human skin tones reflect ancestral climates, telling a quiet story of survival under different suns. In dry, hot regions, community was everything. A lone human could die in a day without water or shelter, but a group, moving together, sharing knowledge, protecting each other, could endure. This led to the evolution of cooperation, empathy, and shared resources. Climate hardship forced humans to become social, not because it was pleasant, but because it was necessary. Interestingly, some of the oldest known structures in human history, stone circles, burial sites, and early temples, are found in arid or semi-arid regions. This suggests that as humans learned to endure the heat, they also began to reflect. Perhaps the unrelenting sun made them look inward, made them wonder about life, death, and the meaning of it all. And while cold climates might have required thicker bodies and stronger shelters, hot climates required mental strength, to navigate, to remember, to hope. The psychological toll of unending thirst, blazing skies, and the ever-present risk of dehydration shaped human consciousness. Heat taught humility. Even today, many human civilizations exist where early Homo once wandered, in the Sahel, in East Africa, in the deserts of the Middle East. These are the lands where the sun still rules, where water is life, and where human resilience continues to be tested daily. The sun gave life to our planet, but it also threatened it. In that balance, humanity learned its most important lessons, not from books or cities, but from survival. We learned to watch, to wait, to move, and to adapt. We learned to endure without guarantees, and perhaps that's the greatest gift the heat gave us, the ability to carry on when there is no shelter. Before machines, before metal, before science, there was survival, and survival was invention. The first tools were not created for convenience, they were created for survival. Early humans did not have cities, weapons, or complex knowledge, but they had a problem-solving mind, a brain shaped by cold nights, burning heat, and the endless search for safety. Out of raw necessity, Homo created technology. Not the kind we think of today, but primitive solutions to deadly problems. And every invention was a response to nature's fury. From the start, climate dictated behavior. Rain flooded shelters, heat dried rivers, cold froze skin and food. Wind blew away entire camps. There was no stable environment, just an unpredictable, shifting earth. In this chaos, early humans became engineers, using whatever was around them. Stone, bone, wood, sinew, mud, and fire. These humble materials became the foundation of humanity's first technologies. The stone tool was the original breakthrough. With sharp flakes chipped from flint, Homo habilis gained a deadly edge. These tools weren't just weapons, they were life extensions. A stone blade could cut meat, skin an animal, shape wood, or open bones for marrow. Later, with Homo erectus, tools evolved into hand axes, scrapers, and complex multi-use implements. The more the climate changed, the more flexible the tools became. But tools alone weren't enough. Shelter was essential. In cold climates, caves were obvious choices, but when caves weren't available, early humans had to build. Using animal bones, large branches, and hides, they constructed windbreaks, huts, and temporary dwellings. Some used mammoth ribs as the framework for tents. These were not permanent homes, but movable protection. The earliest forms of architecture born from environmental necessity. Fire, once captured from lightning or volcanic activity, became the most sacred of all technologies. It was warmth, safety, cooking, and social gathering. But learning to make fire, not just use it, was a revolutionary leap. Rubbing sticks, striking stones, storing embers, all of this required knowledge passed down through generations. Fire was also emotional. It gave people courage during long nights and helped form the first human communities. Clothing was another innovation forced by climate. Naked bodies could not survive wind and snow. Early humans scraped hides with sharp stones, softened them with fat and tied them with sinew. As skills advanced, they pierced skins with bone needles and developed tailored clothing. Each new environment demanded a new wardrobe. Cold meant layers and insulation. Heat required light coverage and protection from the sun. Clothing was not fashion, it was armour. In dry regions where water was scarce, humans created tools to store and transport it. Early vessels were made from hollowed-out gourds, shells, animal bladders, or carved wood. These simple containers extended the range of movement, allowing groups to explore arid zones without immediate access to rivers. Technology made the uninhabitable possible. Weaponry too was shaped by climate. In open plains, where visibility was high, spears and throwing sticks became dominant. In forested areas, close-range weapons like hand axes were preferred. Later, the development of the atlatl, a spear thrower, allowed for distance hunting, increasing both safety and success rates. Hunting wasn't just about food, it was about risk versus reward, shaped by terrain and weather. Some of the most fascinating inventions were invisible. The development of social tools, climate forced cooperation. In freezing storms or punishing droughts, survival depended on sharing food, guarding fire, watching children, and making decisions together. The invention of roles, hunters, gatherers, toolmakers, firekeepers, was a technological leap in social structure. Language may have emerged in part because of this need to coordinate in dangerous environments. A single shouted word could warn of a predator, direct a hunt, or call for help. Over time, grunts became symbols, symbols became patterns, and patterns became early speech. And all of it, language, memory, communication, was driven by the need to outthink a deadly world. Some researchers believe that even art began as climate adaptation. Cave paintings may have been maps, records of animal migrations, or teaching tools. Others suggest they were spiritual, attempts to call back the herds, appease weather spirits, or explain natural disasters. Either way, the act of recording, of reflecting, was a step beyond reaction. It was planning. One overlooked invention is the calendar of the mind. Before written systems, humans tracked seasons through observation. The stars, the movement of animals, the growth of plants. This knowledge allowed them to migrate, prepare food, and avoid famine. It was climate science in its most primal form, built into stories, rhythms, and ritual. In regions where food was scarce or seasonal, food storage became crucial. Early humans dried meat, smoked fish, and buried food in cold pits. These were not luxury methods, they were survival technologies. Knowing how to keep calories safe from rot, animals, and weather was the difference between life and death in the long night of winter. In some areas, humans even began to shape the land itself. They dug pits, built barriers, diverted streams, and used fire to clear land. These were early signs of humanity moving from adaptation to environmental manipulation. It was no longer about escaping the climate, it was about changing it. Over time, some of these inventions became culture. Knowledge was passed down through memory, story, and demonstration. Children learned to shape tools by watching elders. Songs carried lessons about seasons. Myths encoded fire safety, hunting strategies, and flood warnings. Technology wasn't just in the hands. It was in the mind, and eventually the soul. And perhaps the greatest early technology was the ability to imagine something that did not yet exist. To see a rock and envision a knife. To feel the cold and imagine warmth. To be hungry and invent a trap. This mental simulation, this gift of foresight, was climate's ultimate gift. In testing our limits, it awakened our creativity. Primitive technology was never primitive. It was profound. Every flake of stone, every spark of fire, every knot in a leather cord was a line in the script of survival. Early humans didn't build rockets, but they built the mindset that would one day build rockets. And they did it while surrounded by storms, predators, and an Earth that seemed determined to kill them. In the face of overwhelming danger, they created. And that creation is the beginning of everything. Before science, before cities, before language even had written form, there was the climate. The one force every early human could feel, but not control, predict, or fully understand. To them, it wasn't just weather. It was a living entity, a spirit, a god. Climate didn't just shape where early humans lived or how they ate. It shaped what they believed, how they thought, and what they feared. The connection between environment and belief is one of the most important and often overlooked forces in the evolution of the human mind. The earliest humans lived entirely exposed to nature's rhythms. Day and night, cold and heat, dry seasons and monsoons. These were not abstract facts. They were life or death experiences. A sudden freeze could wipe out an entire clan. A drought could kill crops, herds, and people. A thunderstorm could split trees and ignite fires. To survive, humans had to predict patterns, sense danger before it struck, and act quickly. Over thousands of years, our brains evolved deep instincts, a sensitivity to shifts in wind, sky colour, temperature, and animal behaviour. These instincts were not logical. They were emotional. Fear became a survival mechanism. Anxiety became a tool. Suspicion, intuition, awe. All were sharpened by the constant need to respond to a volatile world. But raw instinct was not enough. Early humans also needed explanations. Their minds searched for meaning in chaos. Why does lightning strike? Why does rain sometimes come and sometimes vanish? Why does the sun disappear for months in the far north? These questions gave birth to the earliest mythologies, stories woven from fear, wonder, and the need for order. And almost all of them were deeply tied to climate. Sky gods, rain gods, fire demons, ice spirits. These were not decorative beliefs. They were attempts to survive in a universe that seemed to punish and reward without warning. In Arctic regions, where snow and ice dominated, spirits were imagined as pale, cold, and hidden. In desert lands, gods were fire, sun, and sand, cruel, blinding, and powerful. Forest people imagined nature as alive with green spirits, animals with souls, and the wind as a whispering voice. These beliefs shaped rituals. People danced to call the rain. They fasted to appease the drought. They offered sacrifices to calm storms. These actions weren't superstition. They were survival psychology. Communal rituals that bonded people, gave them hope, and soothed the fear of the unknown. Climate also shaped social behaviour. In harsh, cold climates, survival required tight cooperation. Families huddled together for warmth. Clans needed strong leaders to make fast decisions. Hierarchy and obedience were more common. In warm, abundant regions, where food was easier to gather year-round, cultures developed more relaxed, egalitarian systems. Climate shaped not only belief, but the architecture of society. Even morality was influenced by the environment. In flood-prone areas, water was seen as both sacred and dangerous. Stealing water was a sin. Polluting rivers was taboo. In fire-prone regions, flames were worshipped, controlled, feared. In colder climates, sharing heat and shelter became a moral duty. To refuse help during a blizzard was the same as murder. The environment didn't just test humans physically. It wrote the early laws of right and wrong. As language developed, these ideas solidified into oral traditions. Myths passed from elders to children, generation to generation. Over time, these became religions, cosmologies, and philosophies, but their roots remained deep in the soil, sky, and sea. Even today, in modern religions, echoes of climate-based fear and awe persist. Flood myths appear in cultures across the world. Fire and ice remain symbols of judgment and renewal. The sun is still seen as divine. The moon still governs emotions, tides, and mystery. Perhaps one of the most fascinating aspects is how early humans developed time itself based on climate. Seasons became the first calendar. The position of the sun and stars told when to plant, when to hunt, when to shelter. This gave rise to astrology, not as entertainment, but as a serious attempt to decode the patterns of nature. Farmers, travellers, warriors, all relied on celestial clues to make critical choices. Climate wasn't just weather, it was the clock of life. In some cases, the psychological pressure of unpredictable climates led to the invention of new mental frameworks. Shamans, priests, prophets, these were people who claimed to communicate with the forces of nature. In truth, many were deeply attuned to environmental signs, animal migrations, plant behaviour, sky changes, and could predict events through observation. Their insights were seen as divine. Their role became essential, interpreters of nature's will. Thus, climate not only shaped the physical habits of early humans, how they dressed, where they lived, what they ate, but also their emotional world, their intellectual tools and their collective imagination. Fear of the dark became myths of demons. Gratitude for rain became songs to the sky. The human mind, flexible and creative, turned survival into story, reaction into ritual, and weather into wonder. As we look back, we see that climate was never just background. It was a central character in the human story. It carved not only mountains and rivers, but minds and myths. Our deepest instincts, our awe at a sunset, our dread of storms, our fascination with the stars, are ancient echoes of a time when the world's chaos could not be measured by apps or forecasts. It could only be survived through faith, feeling, and fierce imagination. And so, in every belief system, in every ancient tale, in every cave painting or stone altar, we find fingerprints of the climate. The environment was not separate from early humanity. It was a teacher, a tormentor, a god. And the legacy of that relationship still lives on, not just in rituals or religions, but in the architecture of our minds. Humanity's journey through time has never been a solitary march, but rather a continuous dance with the forces of nature. Among them, climate stands out not just as a background factor, but as a powerful shaping force, a silent sculptor of civilizations, an invisible hand guiding migration, evolution, belief, and survival. From the frozen silence of the Ice Age tundra to the burning breath of the prehistoric deserts, the story of early humans is, at its core, the story of adaptation to climate's unpredictable rhythm. In the beginning, the first Homo species had no tools, no fire, no language, just instinct. Yet even instinct was shaped by temperature, rainfall, and seasonal shifts. The availability of water influenced how long people stayed in one place. The migration of animals was dictated by the seasons, which in turn dictated the movement of those who hunted them. Forests gave shelter during wet, warm eras, while open plains dominated during cold, dry times, forcing early humans to stand tall, walk far, and think ahead. The climate didn't just shape their environment, it shaped their bodies. Neanderthals, for example, had short, stocky builds better suited for retaining heat in cold environments, while Homo sapiens developed leaner bodies ideal for surviving in the sun-drenched savanna. Skin colour, sweat glands, metabolism, and even sleep cycles evolved in sync with environmental needs. We are, quite literally, the children of Earth's changing skies. As the millennia passed, humans did more than survive. They began to observe. They studied the skies, the clouds, the behaviour of animals before a storm. Knowledge became a tool more valuable than any stone axe. With fire came warmth and protection, a weapon against cold nights and wild beasts. With shelter came planning. With agriculture came settlement. But none of it would have been possible without reading the language of the land and weather. The rise and fall of early civilizations often mirrored shifts in climate, the collapse of Neolithic settlements, the abandonment of once thriving regions. Many were not due to war or disease, but prolonged droughts or sudden floods. Nature reminded humanity over and over, it is not enough to dominate the land, one must respect and adapt to it. Even religious beliefs and mythologies carry the fingerprints of climate. Sun gods, rain gods, spirits of wind and harvest. These were not abstract concepts. They were born from the urgent need to understand and influence the environment. Ancient people prayed for rain because crops withered without it. They sacrificed to volcano gods after eruptions reshaped their homes. Their rituals were emotional blueprints for managing climate fear and chaos. It was in a way their first attempt at climate control, through myth, symbol and ritual. Today, when we look at the climate crisis facing modern humanity, we must remember, we are not separate from nature. We never have been. The same atmospheric forces that pushed early humans across continents still move the winds today. The glaciers that once covered Europe and North America may be melting now, but their legacy lives on in the migration paths they carved and the resilience they demanded. Yet there is a profound irony. For most of human history, we were at the mercy of climate. Now, climate is at the mercy of us. Our species, once small bands huddling near fire pits, has grown to dominate the earth, and in doing so, we have altered the very systems that once shaped us. The carbon in the air, the heat in the oceans, the balance of seasons, they all now carry our fingerprint. The child has grown strong enough to reshape the parent. But this power comes with responsibility. Understanding how early humans survived climatic extremes is not just an academic interest. It's a guidebook. They moved when they had to. They cooperated to survive. They built communities based on shared needs and adapted beliefs to face environmental truths. If there is any wisdom to inherit from our ancestors, it is this: adaptation is survival. In closing, climate is not merely a scientific condition. It is a story, a force, a character in our human saga. It has whispered warnings, shouted destruction, and offered gifts to those who listened. And throughout prehistory, it was never just about the strongest surviving. It was about the most adaptable. Whether in snow-covered steppes or sweltering deserts, early humans learned to live not against nature, but with it. As the climate once created us, now we must decide what future we create for it, and for ourselves. Will we be remembered as the species that ignored the winds of change, or the one that finally listened to the oldest voice on Earth? We are, and always have been, children of the climate. The story is not over. The next chapter is ours to write.